Itaewon Sammy, I am back. Look at this. Would you look at that? I am talking to you tonight, from the top of Namsan in Itaewon, Seoul, South Korea. And behind me on this side I'm at the top of the hill. Behind me is Namsan Park, which is the mountain in the center of Seoul, South Korea. This is Itaewon, the village or region of Itaewon, Yeongsan-gu, and the Han River is right behind. If you see this building right here, the big white roof there, I can't see. Yeah, the big white roof right about there. Behind that, about a kilometer, is the Han River. To that side is Gangnam, and to that side is the west. So I'm facing north-ish, going this way. This is south. Anyway, I'm here on the rooftop of my apartment, enjoying a beautiful sunny day, to talk to you about the housing crisis in Korea. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I got asked by a subscriber, I want to say thank you, for subscribing, for liking, for commenting, for sharing. I'm really happy with the growth that I'm getting. I was monetized just a short while ago. I'm not looking to make a huge amount of money, but it's just for fun. I've done this just for fun. I'm not glitzy and glammy. I'm just a guy, Canadian guy, living in Korea for 12 years, semi-retired, and this is just my inside view of a semi-retired guy of what it is to live in Korea, not being, a college graduate school teacher, recent college graduate teacher in Korea, or military, or whatever. I'm a Canadian guy just living my life here in Seoul, South Korea. So, the housing crisis, and it is a big issue here in Korea. This past April, there was a huge upset in the mayoral election, by-election. The opposition party won in Seoul and in the other major city, Busan, by a landslide because of the housing crisis issue and the economy as a whole because of coronavirus. But there's been a huge problem in housing. Like any major city, housing is a huge issue. For example, Toronto, Vancouver, I'm Canadian, so I only know about that. They don't have the space to build. Korea does, but it's highly speculative. There isn't enough affordable housing. And the problem is that the government has been trying for 10 years to try and calm the housing bubble, the speculation. And it has increased the price of housing, number one, across OCAD. I think the number was 50 to 60% housing increase this past year. Even with all of the restrictions, debt ratio restrictions, loan restrictions, like mortgage restrictions, number of houses you can own, taxes on the second house, etc., etc., etc. And that is putting the average person, not the speculators, the average person is feeling the pinch because, like in any country, real estate is the retirement plan for most people. My landlord, I live in a 3-story villa. First floor, the landlord lives. Second floor is a bigger apartment than mine. Third floor is one big apartment where I live in, and a small single room apartment. So the landlord uses that. She owns the building, free and clear, so the money she earns is her living expenses. So a lot of people in Korea, that's what they plan on doing. And that's what they did in the 60s and 70s. And now they're hurting because they can't sell without high taxes. They can't transfer without high taxes. Most of you may have read in the news, the big news right now is the Samsung dynasty, the head passed away a few months ago. And the transfer of wealth to the children is costing them millions of dollars, billions of won, millions of dollars in death tax or transfer tax. So what the rumor is that they're going to donate the art collection that the father had to the Korean government, and to pay the tax bill. So we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking about the biggest company, one of the biggest companies in the world, Samsung. Okay, this global company is owing hundreds of millions. Like I'm thinking the tax bill is $500 million, $500 million. Okay, so imagine like Google or Facebook or Amazon. So people here, like just average people, your mom and dad who bought a house in the 60s or 70s, lived in it, maintained it, paid it off. Now they're trying to pass it to their children or sell it to retire outside of the city, and they can't because of the tax bills, because of what the government has been trying to do. And there was also a scandal in the government, in the federal government, where people who worked in the land office were found to be taking advantage, insider trading type of thing. So that was a big scandal. So how does it work here? Well, much different than the West. We have something called chonse, which is deposit. So there's 3 levels. I'm not going to go into all of them because there's many videos out there that talk about this. So what I'm going to talk about is the 2 main ones. What I do is something called key money. So I put down $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 as a deposit, and I pay monthly rent. So the more you put, the lower your rent. So for example, not going to talk about this apartment. I'll talk about my old apartment. My old apartment was $1,000 a month rent, and it was $5,000 deposit. I get that back, okay, at the end of the term, and it's secured at the government office, right? So it's perfect. The landlord has to put it in a term deposit. They can't spend it. Landlord has to put it in a term deposit and secure it. So if I put $10,000, my rent would come down $100. If I put another $20,000, my rent would come down another $1,000. Another $200. So for every $5,000, your rent drops by approximately $100. So that's how it works here. And the reason why that happens is because in the old days, 60s and 70s, the interest rate in Korea was like 12, 15, 20%. And the landlord would take that money, $10,000, $20,000, put it in the bank and earn money from that. So the rent could be reduced. Okay? So people would take out a loan from, not for key money. Then there's a higher level called that. So the first one is key money. The second one is called chonse or deposit. And typically what you do is you're giving the landlord about 50%, 70% of the value of the home. So $250,000, $500,000 for the deposit for 2 years. And then you pay no rent. The landlord takes that money, puts it into a term deposit, and earns interest, which pays for the rent. They live off of that. Now, what's happening is that the landlords were raising the chonse every 2 years, and it wasn't feasible for these people to keep paying out. So the government tried to stop that, and it wasn't successful. People don't have the money to do it. $500,000 for an apartment. Apartment prices went up, and the corresponding key money went up. The value of houses went up. The taxes went up, and it just snowballed. The government tried to slow it down by increasing the taxes. That just raised the prices, which trickled down to the renters. You cannot buy, unless you're super rich, you cannot buy an apartment here in Korea, and that feeds into the cycle of not having children, because it's so expensive to live here. And people say, okay, you can live on the outskirts. Yeah, you can. But the specialty built cities that are on the outskirts are also expensive because they're attached to the subway lines. Now the government has a plan. They're building high-speed rails, express rails, to connect the outlying cities to the central core. One of them should be online in 5 years, 4 years, and it'll take from the north to the south. It would take what is an hour and 10-minute subway ride to 20 minutes. But that will just increase the value of the land out there. Now, for example, this land here, all of this city, the prices here have gone up 40, 50%. This is the oldest part of Seoul. Itaewon is one of the oldest parts of Seoul. The houses here were built in the 60s and 70s. Now, there are some houses that are being rebuilt, but the land here is all being increased in value because over there is the Yongsan Army base, and that is scheduled to be returned to the Korean people this year or next. It's been talked about for many, many years, but that base is now being decommissioned because they've moved down to their big base. Sorry for the wind, very windy today. They've moved to their base in Pyeongtaek, which is south of here, a big, huge base that the army built. So this base is now, there's nobody there anymore, which is another reason why Itaewon has gone down in popularity by tourism, because there's no more American military base. There used to be like thousands of people there who would, come into town to enjoy food, shopping, and entertainment. So over the course of 8 years, 10 years, the value of all of these houses has gone up because that was going to be turned into a park. So the value here is increased, which in turn increases the deposit. So that crisis has not been controlled by the government properly. And that is a major concern. How are people going to survive? It trickles down into jobs. It trickles down into raising a family, getting married, entertainment, because you don't have money. You're trying to save money to buy a house. You're trying to save money to pay the key money or the deposit. I am planning maybe next year to get a chonsei loan. So what happens is the bank will give the landlord the key money. I will pay the bank the interest only. Okay? I don't have to pay the principal because the key money is secured. The landlord then puts it back into the bank, earning interest. The bank keeps the money. They're win-win. I'm paying interest, and they're paying the interest back to the landlord, right? So, and then they're keeping the difference. I pay, let's say I pay 5% interest. They pay the landlord 1 or 2% interest. They keep the 3% profit, right? At the end of the 2 years, the landlord gives the money back to the bank, and I live rent-free for 2 years, not earning interest on that money. So, but it's not my money. And I'm paying much less than I would be if I did rent. So for example, my old apartment, which is right there. If you see the green roof somewhere around there, there's a green screen. Not this one here, but there's a green screen around there. Behind that was my old apartment. It was about, I'm gonna say 1,000 square feet. I paid about $1,000 a month. If I got a chonsei loan from the bank, I would probably be paying about $300 or $400 a month in interest. And I got a huge discount at my bank on the interest rate. So that is what's happening here and why there's a housing crisis. It is the government handling of the bubble that's trickling down to the people to try to pay these deposits. They can't afford to buy the house. They can't afford to rent it. Everyone's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the government is very clearly at fault in how they manage this. So what's going to happen next? Nobody knows. But hopefully things will turn around. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for liking Itaewon Semi. I'm out.